Welcome into King Whale's album review party. We have a special, very special episode today. I guess this is more like an Apple Music review party, but essentially, we're going to be reviewing Apple's top 10 on their list of the greatest 100 albums of all time. And well, first of all, let me introduce you to my guests. First, of course, we have my cousin, Caleb. Thank you for joining us again.
Howdy, howdy. Nice to
And
be here.
And of course, my regular co-host, Ty. Say hello to the people.
Hello, people.
Hello, people. Caleb keeps coming on. I think we're starting to make this a thing. This is like it's gonna be a thing.
Woo.
I was like, especially after your super group, the music super group, I'm like, I have no idea who is going to be in your top 10 albums, and I'm very excited to find out because I literally have no point of reference for it. So the way that we're going to try to do this, I wish we had enough time to talk about all 100 choices on Apple Music. But unfortunately, we have jobs, and that would probably take like a couple of days just to record, and people ain't really got time for that. So we're just going to talk about the top 10 because it's out, but we're going to compare it to each of our own top 10 albums of all time. So, of course, I want you to drop your list for your favorite top 10 albums in the comments on Spotify. If you're listening, wherever you're listening to this, give us your top 10. Tell us if you agree with Apple Music's picks. Tell us if you don't agree. Tell us if you agree with our picks. And without further ado, we will hop right in. So, at number 10 on Apple Music's list is Lemonade by Beyonce. And honestly, it's not surprising to me at all that this is in the top 10 for some of the greatest albums of all time. It was lauded as that when it came out, and I think it's very rightfully in this spot. I think my biggest surprise with it is that it's not higher. Like, I kind of expected it to kind of be making a push for top 5. Yeah, especially compared to some of the ones that are on here, and we'll kind of get into more of those, but just I don't think I've ever heard an album that's as genre diverse as this album. And I think that's why so many people wanted it to win Album of the Year at the Grammys, because usually you have best country album, best rap album, best R&B album, best. It's like you can't call Lemonade any of those. It's like it's not really a best R&B album. It's not a best country album. It's not a best pop album. It's just a beautiful album with beautiful music, influences from every single layer of music. And of course, Beyonce just has an amazing voice and goes incredible throughout the whole record. So I think that's partially why people felt like, hey, this is the best album, because it truly encompasses every genre, and not like in a cheesy way, not like in a kind of like pulling, like some like can sound like imitation. It did it in a very authentic and incredible way. And I mean, I remember, I don't know if I listened to it exactly in 2016, because on the Apple Music podcast, they were talking about what they felt when it came out. And I remember, I think a couple years later, my sister and I finally got my mom to listen to it. And my mom doesn't really like Beyonce. Well, she likes Beyonce, but she's like, can't she really sing? She's like, Beyonce's a dancer. She's not really that much of a singer. And I'm like, you need to listen to Lemonade, Mom. And especially because like in 2013, my mom went through something very similar. I mean, my father's passed away now, but went through the same thing, infidelity. He ended up leaving his family. And I remember she told me when she listened to it, she's like, and I was like, I feel like that's why you need to listen to it, because like you really understand what Beyonce's talking about, because you went through it as well. Like all of us did as a family. And she was like, a lot of those feelings, she can tell that Beyonce wrote this album as all of that was going on, because a lot of those feelings were fresh. And she's like, when I listen to it, she's like, yeah, I kind of remember feeling that way. She's like, but now I've let it go and it's gone. You know what I mean? Like she moved past it by the time that she got around to listening to it. But she's like, yeah, I can remember all those emotions that she's feeling that she put. And that just shows a lot of the authenticity that Beyonce put into this album. So I think it definitely deserves to be in the top 10. And like I said, I'm kind of surprised it's not higher.
I think for a Beyonce record, it proved that like she was already humongous. She was already Queen Bee
Mhm.
before this point, but I think she uses genre, and it's something I liked in like Renaissance and Cowboy Carter sense, that she plays with this idea of what genre is, but we get to see that early here where it feels like she's more interested in what kind of subgenre will help me get into this emotion that I'm specifically talking about right
Mhm.
here. So like we have songs like Don't Hurt Yourself with Jack White. It's like a hard rock track that goes hard, and she's
Goes hard.
angry and she's intense in it. And then we get country ballads, and we get like softer soulful ballads, and each genre that she plays with feels to amplify the emotion of the song that it's in. And I think it proves, not that she hadn't already, just how talented of a musician she is and an artist she is.
Honestly, I agree with your mom. I'm not a huge fan of Beyonce.
Mhm.
I've never been a huge fan of Beyonce. I do feel like she has some good songs. Um, and she's extremely talented. Like one, she's more of a dancer. I completely agree with that. I don't really think of her as being a good singer. I don't also I don't know enough about her to say whether or not I feel like she actually writes her material or not. Um, but she is very talented. I feel like she is very talented. I mean, she's been, like you said, she's been a household name for the better part of almost 2 decades. Um, but does she deserve to be on the top 10? Does that album deserve to be on the top 10?
Oh, you're not sure about it being here?
I disagree. I don't feel like she should be there. I
Oh,
feel like she's extremely talented. I feel like and I do know a couple songs in the album. I'm not gonna sit here and say I've listened to the whole album.
uh-huh.
And she does have some good songs, but like I said,
Which
I
songs did you
don't
listen to?
I've
Do
heard
you
let me look.
remember?
I'd have to hold them. I've definitely heard that one. Let's
Okay.
see.
Mhm.
Lemonade album Beyonce.
Because, like,
Beyonce.
my mom kind of felt like she was saying the exact same thing that you did. And then she listened to it and she's like, oh, she really can sing. And I'm like, I don't know how you didn't know this before 2016, because it's not like she didn't reveal that she could. But it wasn't
Right.
until this album. Like, when I think about my standout tracks, to me, Sandcastles is my favorite one on the whole album because it really shows off her vocal ability. And then Freedom with Kendrick Lamar, Six
Amazing.
Inch with The Weeknd,
Hmm.
Daddy Lessons with Too Many Zoos, and Lou Pellegrino on that Barry sax on that song. I still listen, those are my workout songs. Like, I still listen to that when I go to the
Hmm.
gym. And as you can tell, I go really often. So I listen to those songs a lot.
I'm laughing with you.
And then to have Formation as a closer too, like
Yeah.
I think it's my
Formation,
personal
I did.
favorite. It's
Hmm.
my personal favorite Beyonce, and I think if you're gonna have a Beyonce album in like your top 10, I can definitely see this as being up there.
Yeah, I think, like, again, if we're talking about her as an artist, it's not necessary. It's like, does she deserve to be in the top 10? It's like, to me, when I listen to this album, I'm like, this is a top 10 album as far as industry impact and what it does with the genres. So maybe, like, if we can come back to it at one point, but I'd love to hear, like, Caleb, after you've listened to the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing, if you still feel the same way. That's what I want to know.
Okay. Yes, I'll do that. That'll be my homework. I'll go through and
Hmm.
like I said, when I go to the gym, also very frequently, I'll listen to it, and then next time we can come back and we can revisit it and see how
Hmm.
I feel. But as of right now, I don't feel like she should be in the top 10.
And again, I didn't get a chance to listen to all these albums on the top 10 list either. Like, I listened to some of them and some of them I already knew, but
Mhm.
I kind of understand. Not if you haven't heard it yet. So now we're going to talk about our personal top 10. So let's start with Ty. Ty, on your personal top 10 list, doesn't necessarily have to be what you think it was for the industry. For Ty, what is number 10 for you?
So
Oh, wait.
from
Sorry. First, forgot to mention our honorable mentions because it's really hard limiting it to just 10. And so we can each go through and give our honorable mentions that almost made it on the list, but not quite. So if you give us those first, Ty, and then we'll do number 10.
Okay, so my 5 honorable mentions in no particular order that I absolutely love and I think are amazing albums, but for me
Mhm.
didn't hit the top 10 would be The Strokes, Is This It?
Okay.
A Tribe Called Quest's Low End Theory,
Mm,
The Zombies, Odyssey and Oracle,
okay.
Alabama Shakes, Sound and Color,
Ah, beautifully
and
engineered album.
that is, I could talk about that. That means so much to me personally, but I just couldn't justify it on the 10.
Yeah.
And then finally, Charlie XCX's Charlie.
Hmm. I remember you mentioned that to me that you really like that one.
That I think it's still relatively new. That album is going to, in 10 years, be looked upon as incredibly influential. I am saying it right now
Okay.
that
Mark it on this podcast. What's today?
in
Friday, May 31st
May
at
31st,
4:22. Ty is predicting the next
by
iconic album 10 years
by
from now.
2035, we're going to be looking back and saying Charlie was like responsible for this new wave of pop music.
Okay. All
But
right. Caleb, how about your honorable mentions?
Honorable mentions, I would have to say one, I guess also in no particular order. Paul Simon, Graceland. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that album or not. I feel like it was a really good album. I remember when I was in like my mid-teens and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I really like that one. Um,
Mhm.
I would also say Eagles. Let's see. I wouldn't say any particular album, but I just feel like they're very I'm probably just their album Eagles or Hotel California. Hotel
Mm,
California. Sticks. Uh, I would say them as a number three.
Sticks.
Yeah. I'm
Which
gonna
which album?
I'm gonna say, I'll be honest, I more focused on my top 10 list than I actually did on my 5
Oh,
honorable
that's
mentions.
okay.
yeah.
Um, let's see. If I were to say any album, probably Pieces of Eight.
Okay.
That
No,
was
so
actually
you,
pretty good.
hmm and you can say multiple Eagles albums if you feel like that's worthy of it.
Okay. Yeah, I would say probably. No, I don't feel like that's worthy, but I personally feel like I would say like Sticks, uh, also Electric Light Orchestra.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
Hmm.
It's a
mhm.
good one.
And what was that? Four?
It's 4.
I think
If
it's
you
four.
only have 4 honorable mentions, that's cool too.
That's fine. That's
Yeah, that's what
fine.
I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
Like I said,
Okay.
I don't feel like I had as much time to put in the work for that list as I could have.
No worries,
That's
man.
I'm
okay.
apologize for
Hmm
that, but those were definitely the ones that I thought of, or definitely ones that I feel like would be really good honorable mentions, but not on my
Mm.
top 10.
So how about for you, Will?
So for my top 10, like I was talking to Ty a little bit earlier, for some of these, like they're similar to ones I have in my honorable mentions, and I'm like I wanted to give some diversity, so like it kind of influenced what I put in my top 10. But my honorable mentions are How I Got Over by The Roots in 2010, by my favorite band,
Mhm.
The Roots. The Good Parts by Andy Grammer, which I wasn't really
Hmm.
expecting, but I really vibe with him as an artist. Kind of Blue by Miles Davis is an honorable mention.
Ooh.
I
Okay.
know, you weren't expecting that. And then of course, Lupe Fiasco's Food and Liquor is another
Hmm.
honorable mention. And as well as Everything by Coda the Friend, which I didn't realize he would shoot up this high, but he's an honorable somewhere in that top 10, top 15 range. He has made it. So,
Wow.
mhm.
Food and liquor.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
that
Oh yeah.
that's got my brain turning for the rest of
It's
your
gonna be on
list.
there. All right. Well, let's start with your list, Ty. So number 10, where are you at?
My number 10 is what I call the best hard rock album that has ever been made, and it is Led Zeppelin's Led Zeppelin 4. I think it is the quintessential hard rock album. It's the album that gave us the most overplayed song in history, but overplayed for a reason. Like it's so easy to say in the year 2024 how like okay, how repetitive Stairway to Heaven is, but to talk to people who grew up in the early 70s to hear about like the cultural impact that that song had is I think it's too big to keep off of this list for me. I think Led Zeppelin is too influential a band to have off of a top 10 list for myself, and I think Zeppelin 4 did their sound the best. I think things like maybe Physical Graffiti are more interesting like later on, but this is like when I think of classic rock, like
Mhm.
this is classic rock.
Hmm.
Okay.
Honestly, I feel like I should have put that on my top 10 list too. Led Zeppelin, like you said, they're so iconic. One, just the fact that one, they made such a huge contribution to rock music in general, but also they added so much like different organic sounds to a lot of their albums. Like they took so much inspirations from nature and put
Mhm.
it into their music. So
Yeah, very Faye inspired on this album. Like they even their lyrics are very Tolkien inspired from Lord of the Rings, and it
yep.
plays
Mhm.
out into the feel of some of the tracks. Very folky at points, um but yeah, I think it's I know the Apple Music pick was Led Zeppelin 2 and it was much lower on the list. I forget exactly where, but I think it is a Zeppelin 4 is a top 10.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I
Yes.
think like when it comes to classic rock, that's definitely not really the area that I know that much about. Like when you said the most overplayed song, I didn't know what you were talking about. And then you're like Stairway to Heaven, and I was like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that was the most overplayed song of all time. Uh,
Well,
but I think that's like when I think of rock, Led Zeppelin is definitely the first band that comes to mind. So I think that's a very powerful representation for classic rock.
Mhm.
well, just one thought. Have you ever heard of like the Forbidden Riff?
No. I've heard of the riff, I mean the lick, but that's in jazz.
Well, what he's talking about, Stairway to Heaven, because it's so overplayed, if you go inside of a music store or a guitar shop or something like that, you are not allowed to play that guitar riff, the Stairway to Heaven riff,
The
in
opening.
stores. Exactly, the
Oh,
opening
really?
riff. You're not allowed to play it. They call it the Forbidden Riff. If you go, yeah, you can look up YouTube videos and everything. If you go inside a guitar store and you start to play the intro on a guitar, they'll ask you to leave. They'll be like, you can
That's
leave now.
That
crazy.
it's that it's
It's
been
that
played
overplayed.
that much and it's a good
Wow.
it is genuinely a great song,
I'm
but it has
like,
just been played so much that it loses all meaning.
I want to like learn it on guitar. I want to learn it on saxophone and just see what happens if I play it in a store now.
That would be, and you know what? It has like a soft, like ethereal entry, like a beginning that could sound good on a saxophone. Like I could
Uh,
hear it.
all right, Caleb. So for number 10, what do you have?
Okay, my top 10. Oh, just number 10.
Just number 10.
Okay, number 10, I would say All Eyes on Me by Tupac.
Okay. All
Mm-hmm.
right.
He has to be, he's not my number one pick. He's not in my top five, but Tupac, well, one that the album's just good in general, but
Hmm.
his impact, like the impact that he's had, on the hip hop industry, just it still has effects today, especially with that album in particular. So I'm like, nah, he's 10. He has to be in there.
Hmm. I think, is that the album that has Mama, the song that he dedicated to his mom on
I
there? Dear
love
Mama.
that song. Yup.
That's it.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that would be, if I had to pick a standout track from that, that would be, I think that's my favorite hip hop song that like there's not a lot of hip hop songs that like talk about your mom. Because that's not really like a big, but I love the way he does it. And I think that's probably my standout track for me on there because like he was willing to go to a place that a lot of rappers weren't. Um and yeah, I think that's definitely, I think it's somewhere on this list. I'm kind of surprised that like this album isn't higher on, like I'm surprised that this album isn't one of the top albums for rap on Apple Music's top 100. I think it's in the 60s or something if I'm not mistaken. But
Mhm.
yeah, definitely a hugely influential hip hop album. You heard it here first. Uh so I guess for my top 10 album, I have Do You Want More by The Roots. And
Oh,
this was
two Roots
really hard for
picks.
me. Yes. Because I was torn between this album, How I Got Over by The Roots, and Things Fall Apart, because The Roots have like if you listen to a band that has transformed their sound, if you listen to like their first album, this was their second album. If you listen to this one compared to How I Got Over, it doesn't sound like the same band because they're doing such a different style. And I think Things Fall Apart kind of blends the styles more because like How I Got Over is more of like a conscious, almost like rap rock album. It's very hip hop focused, but like there's a lot of conscious, like heavy hitting messages. And Do You Want More is just this crazy jazz rap album. And like jazz rap, like he's riffing with, it's like the perfect blend of hip hop and jazz. And like Steve Coleman is playing sax on it. And I feel like as far as jazz rap goes, like if anyone said like, "Hey, give me a good jazz rap album," this is the best jazz rap album there is. Do You Want More by The Roots. At one point, he has a song where Black Thought is scatting and freestyling, and he goes back and forth with the bassist, with the drums, and with the saxophone on SA Man. It is like if you're just talking about jazz rap, like it's one of the best rap albums of all time, in my opinion. But if you're just talking about jazz rap, I think it is definitely the top, the best album in that genre. So that's why I had to give it the spot at number 10.
Wow, so that means that there's no Tribe Called Quest for you later
Well,
on the list.
maybe not.
Maybe not. But to say that that's the best jazz rap album
Hmm.
is quite surprising because I thought that honor would have gone with How I Got Over for you
I think
in
the
your
reason
pick.
why I have to go with this one is because it also sounds like it was recorded live. Because Tribe Called
Mhm,
Quest, I mean, they track a lot of their drums.
mhm.
This one felt like Questlove is playing drums while Black Thought is rapping. And a huge part of jazz is doing it like you can't really just like layer jazz. Like you can if you want to, but like for hip hop songs, I can have a guy come in, record the drums, someone else record the guitar, someone else record the piano, and then someone else put the vocals on top. You can't do that with jazz. Everyone has to be playing together because everyone is going to be playing off of each other. You have to do it at the same time. And to me, it feels like this album, Do You Want More, was recorded at the same time in that organic way. Like it feels like a jazz combo performing in front of you.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I did.
Interesting.
I never knew that
I'll
about
have to go
jazz.
back and re-listen to it with that mindset of like the energy of a live album.
Yeah, and that's definitely that. And that I think that's why it gets the spot that it does.
I just thought that was interesting. I never knew that about jazz in general. I mean, I do like jazz, and I the older I get, the more I listen to it, and it makes me feel old. But I'm
Oh,
serious. Like
Yeah.
I said to Erica the other day, I was like, man, I was like, I'm listening to jazz more and more often. I feel like my grandfather. But it's interesting that you're saying that it has to riff off of each other like that, and that you can't just not that there isn't an art, there's definitely an art to mixing, but the fact that apparently it has to have like that harmonious sense where everyone's working together at the same time. Interesting.
It's just not the same because like I've been in groups where like the piano player will do something and then the drummer picks up on it and then he plays it back to the piano player and then the piano player plays it back, all while someone is soloing and waiting to see if he'll pick it up. And I feel like this album captures that spirit, and that's why I'm like, this is why this is the top jazz rap album. So
Hmm.
yeah. All right. So next up at number 9, we have Nevermind by Nirvana. So obviously, this is the song Smells Like Teen Spirit that came from this album. That obviously became a
Mhm.
hugely impactful song. Even people that don't really know rock or like classic rock that much, like myself, still know Smells Like Teen Spirit. You know, it's still been hugely influential in music and TV shows. So, what do you guys think about this album being here at number 9?
I agree
Mhm.
personally. Um, I don't I don't know if I should say this or not, but I even put that in my list, like Nirvana, just because I feel like one, I feel like it's a good album. Two,
Mhm.
but like rock music has been around for decades. Rock music's been around since the 50s, and it's gone through a lot of changes. But when Nirvana came out, like that changed the game.
Mhm.
Like rock music shifted in the early 90s, early to mid 90s, and I feel like Nirvana is the catalyst that started that. And so I I I feel like it's safe. Yes, I think they deserve to be there.
Yeah, I think it is the grunge album that if you're
Mhm.
going to include a grunge rock representation anywhere, it's going to be Smells Like Teen Spirit. Even beyond its subgenre of just alt rock in general, I don't think anything has been as influential as Smells Like Teen Spirit. And I think it especially sits in that place because we never get to see, I mean, Kurt Cobain was taken from us way too early in life that we never got to see what Nirvana could have done afterwards. And so we have In Utero years later, but Smells Like Teen Spirit is just the album. It is a collection of, at times it feels like a collection of hits, like a greatest hits, just because of how great and how much radio play everything got. But even deeper cuts on this album are amazing. And while I may always be more of a Pearl Jam man myself,
Mhm.
I think Kurt Cobain was just a musician that belongs up here. And I was very close to putting this album on my 10, but you'll see why later.
Well, I was about to ask you that real quick before we go into ours. Because like obviously you guys know classic rock a lot more than I do. I think this album definitely fits in the top 10 in order to represent rock. Because I'm kind of surprised. This is actually the only rock album in the top 10. So I'm kind of surprised
Mhm.
that it ends up representing, it's pretty much representing rock right now. And I know as far as this list goes. And I know you mentioned Led Zeppelin number 4. Do you guys feel like this is a good album to represent the rock genre, whether that's classic rock, grunge, alternative? Because again, it is the pretty much the only rock album in the top 10.
Well, I mean, no, the Beatles.
Oh,
Literally, the
I
Beatles are
guess,
number
yeah,
three.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a different genre, like
But it's a different
rock.
style, yeah.
Rock from the 60s and the 70s and 50s sounds different from rock from the 90s. But for like an alt rock, if you had to pick one, I think that is a really solid choice.
Okay.
I
All
feel
right.
like I agree. I feel like it's a very solid choice, but I feel like you're asking, do you feel like it's a safe thing to kind of encompass um like not kind of encompass rock as in, oh, here's its contribution to the top 10 list. I don't I think it should be there, but I don't think it should be the exclusive representative of rock. because it's such a
It's too wide a
as-
category.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like if you like rock music, the essence of rock has stayed the same since the 50s, you know, kind of like uh alternative, rebellious energy a lot of the times. However, if you take rock from each decade, it all sounds completely different.
Yeah.
So
And
Right.
like
Because
despite
this wouldn't
how
represent punk, this wouldn't represent indie,
okay.
this wouldn't represent glam rock, this wouldn't represent
Mhm.
art house. Like it's not going
Yeah.
to represent any subgenre, but for what it is, representing grunge is like this is the grunge album.
And
Like I,
like
I don't think anyone could, it'd be very difficult to justify anything like Pearl Jam's 10 or Soundgarden's Supermassive Black. No, that's Muse. Soundgarden's I'm drawing a blank, but other classic grunge albums, like
okay.
you couldn't.
Yeah, because I feel like the top album on this list, we won't talk about it just yet, but I feel like it represents its genre. Like if I had to pick one album that I feel like can represent the whole genre, I would pick that album. So that's kind of what I mean. Like I feel like that
I
album
see.
represents its genre. And so again,
yes.
but again, that's not the only album of its genre that even made it on here.
Mhm.
So, okay, so at number 9 for me, I have Late Registration by Kanye West. And this was another one that was almost a honorable mention because I'm like, do I really like it more than How I Got Over by the Roots? Do I like it more than Kind of Blue, than Food and Liquor? And the reason why it ends up being here at number 9 is because, first of all, I think it's a great album. And second of all, it is the funniest album I have ever heard. It is the funniest album. It has the best skits on an album that I have ever heard. And
Yeah.
I think skits, especially in hip hop, but also kind of further into more genres, like skits have kind of become a part of albums, you know?
Mhm.
And I think I'm like, I need something that kind of represents what a skit can be and how it can really bring an album to life. And the Broke Five Broke from Late Registration, it still has me dying. Like I'm listening to stand-up comedy. And that's why it has to get the number 9 spot for me. And some of my standout tracks, Heard 'Em Say, I absolutely love the way that Kanye West speaks on that record. And in fact, like that song, Heard 'Em Say with Adam Levine, it ended up showing up on Maroon 5's album. It Won't Be Soon Before Long. They interpolated that into one of their songs because I guess Adam Levine liked the hook so much, he asked if he could use it. And I heard that Maroon 5 song before I heard this album. And I was like, I've heard when I listened to this album, I was like, I've heard that before. And I'm like, oh, Maroon 5, like they were like, hey, Kanye, that hook. I don't know who wrote it, but they wanted it so bad. They put it on their album. And then obviously Touch the Sky was Lupe Fiasco's coming out party. Absolutely love that song. Drive Slow is one of my all-time favorites. My Way Home, Common has an incredible verse on there. And I think one of my favorite songs in this is Diamonds from Sierra Leone, because that song is so hype. It's one of my favorite Jay-Z verses of all time. And as we all know, I am a gym aficionado, and that is the song I listen to when I am going hard. And that is why Late Registration, like the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, yes, this feels right. This should be number 9. This is not just an honorable mention. Again, primarily because I think it has the best skits out of any album. And that includes some of the skits in the albums that we're going to get to in a little bit on Apple's Top 100.
I think I could not agree more that I think it's his best album. I'm a little more privy to Late registration or graduation myself, but
Yeah.
Late Registration I think is definitely like peak early thousands Kanye, and like the influence that his production style had on the industry and rap going forward. Even not even rap, I think Kanye West helped change pop music to being more like borrowing from rap than maybe even the other way around. And I think Late Registration is like the peak of that.
Also, it's Kanye at his prime. Like those those were the golden days of Kanye. And that's it. That's my only contribution. I feel like that was just when he was at his peak, and
Mhm.
all of his music was just iconic. Like I said in like the last podcast, he's extremely talented, and I feel like his talents really shined in the early 2000s. I feel like it still shines now, but at that point, like that was just his golden age.
Yeah, like My Beautiful
Mm.
Dark Twisted Fantasy made it onto this list. But I think I would still agree. I think this is Kanye West's best album. I
Mhm.
think I like Graduation, but I feel like this album I think was really before Fame really even started to touch Kanye. Because I feel like Graduation, even that song Good Life, the Fame was starting to influence his music style. And I think this is before, and Fame will do that, don't get me wrong. Like Fame is a huge
Mhm.
part of it. But I think this is like the last album where Fame really it hasn't influenced his music style. He's like, it's coming from a different place, is what it really feels like. So, all
Mm.
right, Caleb, what do you have for number 9?
Number 9, I have Biggie Smalls, Ready to Die.
Ah, two. Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah. Oh,
Right next to Tupac.
I know. I'm like, you just gave us All Eyes on Me and now Ready to Die. Okay.
don't stay with me. When you hear the first half of my list, the first half of my list does not match my second half because I feel like towards the end of my list, like, the 10, 9s, 8s, those were ones I feel like, yes, they have to be on here. And then 1 through 5 was like, these are my favorite. Like,
Hmm.
um, but I feel like Ready to Die has to be on there. One, Biggie Smalls. uh, Once again, just like Tupac, a very iconic rapper, has made huge impacts on the rap industry. And like when he first came out, his rap style, nothing was like it. But what I think is interesting is Ready to Die. Don't quote me on this, but if I remember correctly, that was his first album after he died. So he had just died, and then the album drops, Ready to Die. And so
Mm.
and it felt weird. Like I'm talking like I was there or something like that. But just
Yeah,
the
that was a little bit before our time.
but I feel like there's a lot of good songs on that album. There's Juicy, that's like iconic, Big Papa, iconic, but also just I feel like I feel like it represented a lot. Like after he died,
Mhm.
to me, it's very fascinating how it all lined up, and that plus his impact, I feel like he's on my list. He's top 10.
Yeah, I can completely
Yeah.
understand that. It was hugely influential. I think this was his debut studio album, the one
Mhm.
that you're talking about where he died right before it was released. That was his second one, Life
Life
After
After
Death.
Death.
Oh,
And
you're right.
yeah.
You're right.
Because
Um
that was in 97.
yeah, yeah, and that was the year that I was born. So, we were both born. Were we all born in 97? I know Ty and I were.
Sure. No, I'm at 99, baby.
99, baby. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I mean Ready to Die really was I mean, I have to disagree with the title. I don't think Biggie was ready to die. I think he should still be with us. Um, but like I said, that was a very intense rap beef that he was going through with Tupac. And it's crazy how these things, I'm not going to say like can manifest, but clearly it was very much so on his mind, especially with this album. And
Mm.
yeah, there's a lot of hip hop that we wouldn't have if it wasn't for this album.
Yeah, it's one of those like foundational
Hmm.
albums that like you just can't have anything that comes afterwards without it, amongst many others. It's a pillar.
Yeah. And I know like a lot of people have said like the standout song I think for me is um me and my girl, except he doesn't say girl. But this is a clean podcast. And a lot of people have commented on like how beautiful the story is. but they were like, why does he keep calling her his like this was a time where like, you know, people were still confused about like what is hip hop's relationship with misogyny, and you know, like using that word to describe it created a firestorm because it's like you're describing her so beautifully, but why are you using this word to describe her? And Biggie was just like, it's just me and my, you know, her. And like even Nas had a line on his song where he said like an immaculate version of me and my by Biggie, because a lot of people have said like this is like a beautiful romantic song, but they just don't understand why he describes her that way. But it was part of the culture and is part of, I think, that conversation that it created is part of what makes hip hop so influential. And I think one of the producers on here, Easy Mo B, he actually did a whole album with Miles Davis, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, one of the really underrated and really good hip hop producers, Easy Mo B, worked on this one and helped turn this into a classic.
Nice. That's awesome. I didn't know any of that stuff. I feel like going back to what you said, like just the title of the song, I feel like a big part of it had to do with like hip hop had started in the early 80s. You know what I mean? So there was like
Hmm.
kind of an established idea, an established norm towards the end of the 80s. But then at the beginning of the 90s, that's when gangster rap emerged. And so
Right.
I feel like that definitely had an impact that a lot of people weren't fond of at the time. Shoot, I feel like people still aren't fond of, the idea of
Hmm.
gangster rap and how it's evolved into trap and drill. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But but I definitely feel like that affected the name of the song and other parts of his albums.
Hmm.
Mhm.
All right, Ty, number 9. What do you have?
This will be a very out of left field album.
My
And
favorite kind.
it is Almarema by Paco de Lucia. He is a flamenco guitarist.
Okay.
This was an album that was foundational. Number one, the Apple list is very US centric. It does not represent music from across the world. And so
Right.
that was partially my introduction to including Almarema on here, because when I used to play classical guitar, and when I was really getting into it, I was listening to Paco de Lucia, and flamenco and jazz guitar that he plays is beautiful. The titular track was the first time I had listened to guitar that really moved me outside of like a rock setting that I had grown up with. I had listened to it, and it had, I mean, it had done something to me. It opened a whole world of how you can play the guitar, and it brought me to a new level of appreciation. I don't know enough about flamenco and jazz classical guitar to say if this is like the peak of the genre. I just am not educated enough on it to say, but for me, this is the one that led me down that journey, that introduced me to many guitarists that I will still listen to today, and I will often go back to this album and think of how beautiful it is, and how much it opened my eyes to different kinds of techniques.
I mean, out of left field is an understatement because
Yeah.
I was not expecting, like, I knew you play guitar, but I was never gonna expect that because his name, what was his name again? Can you repeat it for me?
Paco de Lucia.
De
I'm not
Lucia.
sure
Okay.
entirely if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. He's from Spain.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, I love how like that's like an album that helped influence you as a musician because you are a musician as well. You know, made it on here, and that's something I will have to check out so I can have something to say about it.
He has this album with two other. If I had to recommend one to you, it would be the album The Guitar Trio, and it is
Okay.
a jazz guitar album.
Okay.
I think for you, I think you would appreciate that one a little bit more. And it's very much a me pick, but I think also too, I just want to call out that the best 100 albums, I think if you're going to get that big and you're coming from a company that has access and broadcast music from across the world, I think some more choices outside the US should have been kind of brought into the conversation.
It is very US and UK based. Yeah, I would say
More
that.
than Bad Bunny. Bad Bunny is the only Spanish artist that we had on this entire
Yeah,
list.
I don't know if that counts
Oh.
as representation. Uh, okay. Do you have any thoughts on this pick, Caleb?
No, not really. I'm just learning. I'm learning. I'm just
Learning,
sitting back and
exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
learning.
All right, so I guess we can move up to number 8 that they have on their list. Now this is an album that I definitely like, and I can't really say I grew up on the album. I grew up on a song from this album, and that is "Back to Black" by Amy Winehouse. And as a kid, like this is one of the few on the list that I can remember when it came out because I was alive. Well, actually, it actually has a lot of albums from the 2000s. But anyway, I remember when this one came out. I remember when Rehab came out. We used to blast that song over and over and over again throughout the entire house. Like I could sing it to you right now because I have all the lyrics memorized. My sister used to put us in timeout and play the song. So we definitely know that song very, very well. I think for me, this is the first album that I'm like, I don't know if this is top 10. I think it's a very powerful album. I think it's very deep. I think it belongs on this list, maybe even top 25. But when I'm just comparing it to some other things like Kind of Blue by Miles Davis, to me, I don't see how this one is so high up and we don't have a jazz album on the top 10 because again, it's very powerful. And I think it's very deep and and it's got a good influence of like jazz and blues and Amy Winehouse is does a fantastic job with production and anything. But again, when I think about like Kind of Blue, it's like Back to Black wouldn't even exist if we didn't get Kind of Blue, if we didn't have Miles Davis, because a lot of that jazzy sound that she pioneered, that she used on this album, it came from Miles Davis. Like he's the guy that put that there. So it's like I feel like it belongs on the list, belongs in the top 25, maybe even top 20. I can't put it over like um Kind of Blue. But it is a fantastic album, don't get me wrong, and one of the best ever.
I think I kind of agree. I feel like Amy Winehouse was an amazing singer. You know,
Mhm.
she was an amazing singer. She had an amazing voice, and I feel like like you said, Back in Black was a really good album. And like you said, Rehab, you know, when that song came out, or that album and that song in particular, like it was doing great. It was topping the charts. It's almost concerning the fact that it was so successful and that
Yeah,
it resonated so deeply with so many people. But what's interesting is like she was speaking on her experience. She didn't want to go to rehab,
I
and she
know.
made a song. And it's sad because I believe not long after, you know, she passed away as a
I
result
know.
of that. But
Yeah.
uh, I definitely, I feel like, you know, top 15. I wouldn't say top 10. But like,
Yeah.
but as we're going through the top 10, it's my idea of what should be on there is very slanted. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, considering what is on the Apple list as a whole, I think I think there's so many other albums that sit in that 25 range that I think could justify their position over Amy Winehouse. I think there will Amy Winehouse is a musician that she is one of a kind. I don't think there's
Hmm.
really been anyone that has kind of filled her shoes for her style. But when I think of, I guess just personal taste, but I look at their list and I see something like Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On,"
I
and I
know.
think that like to me that feels way more influential than Amy Winehouse's. But
Yeah,
I
that
definitely
or
think she should be in this like top 20 range for sure.
yeah, to me, like what's going on or even Trouble Man, like I said, and if it wasn't for Kind of Blue, I would be putting those up there as well. I think to me, what's going on in Trouble Man should be higher, like knocking on the door of the top 10, if not top 10. Um, and again, Back to Black, it's a great album, but to me, it feels like Beyonce did the whole like I feel like Beyonce did the entirety of Back to Black with Daddy Lessons. It's
Mm,
like
hmm.
that whole album is encompassed by one song. Now again, it's a different kind of pain because Amy Winehouse was going through a lot. And again, we all love the Rehab. It's a
She's very
fantastic
vulnerable,
album.
and
Yeah.
it's great to see an artist so comfortable with being vulnerable and kind of owning that,
Hmm.
to not feel shamed into discussing things that are maybe uncomfortable for some people to listen to. And I
And
think
that
that's incredibly difficult to be in her shoes to
yeah.
do that.
And if you tell me that like that's directly what kind of paved the way for Beyonce to do Lemonade, because before Lemonade, Beyonce really hadn't done anything that like deep and personal. Because like she most of her music, it wasn't like surface, but it wasn't as like personal to me and what's going on in my personal life, putting it on a record. And
Mhm.
like, Amy Winehouse, like I said, if Beyonce's telling me like, well, I did Lemonade because of Back to Black, then I think if I felt like Back to Black still had to go above Lemonade, I feel like I probably would do like Back to Black at 10 and then Lemonade at 11. Because I
Mhm.
still feel like Kind of Blue needs to be there. Still feel like a Marvin Gaye song probably needs to be there.
Mhm.
But now we can talk about our number 8 picks. So Ty, what do you have for number 8 on your list?
Number 8 is, I want to preface it that I do not think it is necessarily the best or even the most influential to this point electronic album, but for my money, I think it is an amazing album and it is my personal favorite, and that is 99.9% by Kaytranada.
I should have seen this coming.
I think when I go back and I listen to it, I just
I'm glued up.
I'm glowed up. It's There's not a single track that I want to skip. And I
Uh-huh.
think the secret sauce to me is Kaytranada makes this electronic club beat so accessible outside the club setting. Like I will listen to anything off of 99.9% when I'm like walking to the grocery store or I'm at the gym when I go. Like it is one of those albums that I think will also like I think be remembered further down the line of blending R&B and hip hop with electronica. I mean, we already see it today with lo-fi, like trying to mix like a hip hop beat with this electronic sound.
Hmm.
And I think Kaytranada was not like the number one pioneer for electronic music today, but I think for that blend, I think he's my favorite.
I'm
Yeah.
learning a lot today.
Have you ever heard the album, Caleb?
No?
So that album, did it come out in 2016?
2016.
Wow, what a crazy year for music that 2016 was.
Hmm.
Like,
Mm.
if we're looking at a lot of our albums and a lot of the ones that Apple Music has on here, I think like 2016 has been represented by a lot. Like it's pretty insane. And like I remember we used to listen to that album like on our way to and from high school. And so
Hmm.
like that feels like, an album that kind of grew up with. And he did this one song with Talib Kweli called Traveling Light with Anderson .Paak. And K
Hmm.
Tronada produced that beat. And he really brought out, I feel like, a different side of Talib Kweli's in his style.
Hmm.
Um off his album Radio Silence, and it was fantastic. And so yeah, he's definitely an incredible producer. And I
I
think
think
that is a yeah, excellent.
that's something across all of his works is he's always had amazing features on any track that has vocals. He has introduced me to so many artists that I now really enjoy their music. He has brought on artists that like he this was my first introduction to both Anderson .Paak and the experimental jazz group Bad Bad Not Good.
Oh,
I learned of both of
such a
them
good group.
from this album, and I'm so thankful every day that I have because I
Yeah.
have since grown to absolutely love them. But there's not a single song on here that feels like it's so perfectly tight. Like it is exactly as long as it needs to be. Everything fires on all cylinders. I think it's a perfect electronic album.
Yeah. Gotta agree with that. Um, so I guess I'll go next while we're talking about albums that came out in 2016. So at number 8, I actually have We Got It From Here. Thank You for Your Service
No
by Tribe Called
way.
Quest. By Tribe Called Quest. Yep.
No way.
And I think it's partially the narrative around this album that did it for me. And there's another album on my list that's like the narrative kind of surrounding it, what happened, because Fife Dog is one of my favorite rappers of all time. Absolutely love him. I think he made Tribe Called Quest what they are. I really like Q-Tip as well, but Fife Dog to me was the guy in Tribe Called Quest. Like I loved all of his verses. I remember when I heard Bugging Out Bugging Out by Fife Dog. And I first heard that verse, and I could rap it for you right now, and I'm not going to because this is a podcast where we're talking. We're not rapping, right? But like
Do
to
it.
me, it was like that's the kind of
Oh.
rapper that I see myself as, and that's the kind of rapper that just the effortless. I don't think I had heard someone do it so effortlessly. And that's really what it feels like. It wasn't always like deeply lyrical, but it was still witty and it still hit you. And it was like he was always just having fun on all these verses. And the way that they broke up was really sad. Like the way that the Tribe Called Quest group broke up because Fife Dog felt like he was getting pushed out by Consequence and Q-Tip, and like there was lots of rifts between them. And then for them to come together almost 20 years later, because, and I think it's partially because all these artists started coming out, like Kendrick Lamar, like Anderson .Paak. Talib Kweli was already around, but a lot of artists were talking about how much Tribe Called Quest influenced them. And I feel like that kind of helped generate a lot of, like even J. Cole would talk about how much he was influenced by Tribe Called Quest. And I feel like that kind of got a lot more attention back on them. And I feel like that kind of allowed them to come together and make this album. And this album, to me, just represents all the facets of hip hop and all the facets of like the human emotion. And that's why I say, Do You Want More is still the best jazz rap album. Because to me, this album isn't just jazz rap. It's not purely jazz rap. It goes
Mm.
into it, but a lot of the production styles, like Kanye West helped work on some of the beats. I think J. Cole worked on producing on some of them, and all of it just creates this incredible musical style, and it sounds like a hip hop band because like they pulled in Busta Rhymes for a couple of tracks, they pulled in Consequence, they pulled in Jarobi White. I can't remember if he plays bass or not. Talib Kweli had a fantastic verse. Kendrick Lamar absolutely slayed his feature on Conrad Tokyo. One of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite verses by Kendrick, and one of the
Mm-hmm.
most profound features I think he's ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And even Kanye West got on there for the Killing season, and I think like this needed to happen in order for us to say goodbye to Fife Dog because then he passed away before this album even came out. And even the name of
Right.
it, I feel like We Got It From Here. Thank you. I feel like that's a message to Fife Dog. And
It is
like
a send off.
at first I thought this was like a posthumous album. Like Fife Dog passed away, so they made this album with some of the verses that they never got to record. But no, he was recording this like in 2015 while he was alive. This was like they didn't know like that this is not a posthumous album like on purpose, you know what I mean? Like it's not like Michael Jackson's album that came out after he died of stuff that was recorded. This was, and it was like kind of like, okay, Fife Dog, we got it from here. Thank you for everything you've done. And I feel like that title, like it still fills me with emotion. Like Fife Dog is one of the few celebrities that passed away that still like almost hurts. Like it feels like I knew him because I knew Tribe Called Quest so well. And even though like I don't even think this album has his best verses, but for
Mhm.
me, it means so much that it has to be on here. And especially because
Yeah.
like, and even like my dad suffered a lot from diabetes, and that's what Fife Dog ended up dying of. And that's what just makes it even more personal. And so it's
Mhm.
like, and I still think, even beyond all that, I still think it's their best album because I think
It's
it's
great.
how cohesive they work together.
Mhm.
And it's beautiful to me. This is a truly beautiful album.
Hmm.
This is my personal favorite jazz rap album that for the
Okay.
longest time I had on this list, but I ended up taking it off for Low End Theory for the
Okay.
like the influence of
Hmm.
it. This is I love this album. You're the one who turned me on to A Tribe Called Quest. Um, I think it's such a beautiful, I love albums that are mournful like that.
Oh
Like
yeah.
it's fun, but like Lost Somebody is such a beautiful track
Oh
for
yes.
them to say goodbye.
Hmm.
And I love its inclusion. I think, but it's at the same time, it's a very like it's a very socially conscious album at the same like with the space program and We the People as like back to back to set the tone and start this album is just is great. I love I'm obsessed with the Elton John
Yes.
sample on Solid Wall of Sound. I will in my head I will say I will sing Solid Wall of Sound constantly. Like it's a problem. I sing it so
Uh-huh.
much in my head because it is so catchy and I have it like the way Busta Rhymes says it. I just got it stuck in my head. No, I couldn't agree with you more that this album is so deserving to be up here.
Yeah. 2016 truly was an incredible year. And I think like one of the standout tracks for me is Mobius, which I wasn't
Mhm.
expecting because like Q-Tip, Five Dollar, like they're not even on it. It's a song with Consequence and Busta Rhymes. But again, to me, it shows such a multifaceted layer of hip hop in just one song. Because Consequence
Mhm.
has this cool, relaxed delivery, break bread, bills, $1 million. Like he's completely on the beat and just a very smooth, relaxed, and like it represented one side of hip hop. And then Busta Rhymes is like, as I combine, and he comes in all crazy, and it's like he's like off the beat but still on it at the same time. And
Yeah.
it's like, how do you get those two styles in one song? You can even hear the production change just so slightly to accommodate Busta Rhymes' verse, and it's like this is hip hop to me. This
Mhm.
this is hip hop. Yeah. All right. So that is number. Oh, Caleb,
Caleb.
you're number 8.
I've been sitting here patiently waiting. I've been like, is it my turn yet? And, and then I was like, oh, okay. Now that we've talked about like hip hop and techno, my number 8 is "You Don't Mess Around with Jim" by Jim Croce. Um, it's more
Okay.
of like a folk country album. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Uh, but if you've heard songs like Time in a Bottle, let's see, let's Photographs and Memories, those are all songs that are on the album. Actually, I don't think Time in a Bottle is, but songs like Operator, for me, it's an iconic album. Okay.
Mhm.
I can see that this isn't deeply resonating with the crowd, aka, but
I want to hear your explanation for
I
it because I'm
yeah,
just not that
I
familiar
want to
with
hear
it.
you
Yeah.
talk about it.
Yeah.
okie dokie, got you. Um, I've always liked Jim Croce. I like he's been a good storyteller. He's a good storyteller, and it really shines in his music and his songs. But two, um, really why it's on this list and why it's number 8 is because it deeply resonates with me. Um,
Mhm.
I've just always loved kind of like more of a folky sound in music, and Jim Croce does a good job of that. But songs like Photographs and Memories, it's just when I listen to those songs, it just, I don't know, it just touches something. It kind of gets me in my feels and in my emotions and makes me just think about life. You know what I mean? Just
Mhm.
kind of it almost makes me reflect. Like I'm looking at the album names here, but definitely like Photographs and Memories, Time in a Bottle. Like if I could spend time in a bottle, you're welcome. Don't don't
Somebody,
clip
Oh,
somebody
that.
clip it.
it's recorded.
Well,
It's in the cloud already.
oh well. All right, it's there forever now. But even in that song, Time in a Bottle, I feel like it's so introspective. He's just like, if I could just put time in a bottle and just thinking, I don't know. To me, it's just it kind of makes you think, but then it also touches your feelings. It just makes you think about life. I just love it. I love his music, and
Mhm.
he'll be featured again. It's just he's one
All
of my
right.
top musicians.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, nice. I know my dad has listened to him a lot growing up because I recognize the album cover. I have seen that album cover around at home, but I can't say I've ever really listened to him. So I'll have to add this to the list.
Yeah, like I'm gonna make a playlist based upon these. That's why I'm writing them down based upon these albums that you guys suggest of stuff that I haven't heard. So I am excited to discover another artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.